Don't miss the action of Star Trek The Next Generation, Saturday at 7 on CFCF 12.
Irma's improving, but what about the other children of war? An explosive collision at sea. And strong as an ox, maybe stronger.
CTV News with Lloyd Robertson.
Good evening. A tiny girl lying in a hospital bed in England tonight has forced the world to look at new horrors from a war that seems to have no end. We've heard of mass rapes in Bosnia, seen the brutality of the so-called ethnic cleansing. Now, the story of little Irma has shown us more victims of this murderous conflict, the children of Bosnia. As CTV's George Wolf reports, there was good news for Irma today, but not for others trapped behind the guns of civil war.
British doctors battled through the night to save the life of 5-year-old Irma, a child who's become a symbol of the Bosnian tragedy. In a 3-hour operation, neurosurgeons drained fluid which was causing swelling around her brain and removed shrapnel from her back.
There is evidence of damage to the nerves of the back, but it will be many weeks before we will know her final neurological outcome, during which time she will stay under neurosurgical observation.
Flowers arrived all day at Irma's London hospital in an outpouring of public sympathy. Doctors say she shows no evidence of brain damage, but Irma is suffering from meningitis, a dangerous infection of her nervous system. Her father's at her bedside, apparently relieved that she is resting more comfortably.
He still worried, of course, and still has tears in his eyes.
Irma's plight aroused the sympathy of the world, moving British Prime Minister John Major to order her evacuation from Sarajevo on a specially arranged Mercy flight Monday night. But Bosnian doctors say there are many more like her.
We are very, very disappointed that Irma is the only child who was taken from Sarajevo, although there were the whole ward, and the plane was taking only one kid from our town.
The UN says there are 41 cases like Irma's, children in desperate need of medical care not available in Sarajevo. Cases like 11-year-old Adam, whose face was smashed by shrapnel, 14-month-old Amra, who's suffering from a spinal tumor, and 10-year-old Amar, who has shrapnel lodged near his optic nerve and could lose his sight. 41 children have been approved for evacuation, but before today, no foreign country had volunteered to take them in.
This is long-term medical care, sometimes very complex and certainly very, very costly that we're talking about. So countries aren't too anxious to offer beds because no one's going to pay for these beds except the countries.
A number of British hospitals are now offering beds to other children like Irma, but it may not be enough. The United Nations says another 400 cases are being screened. Little Irma has reminded the world of its failure to stop the Bosnian War, but there are many more like her. George Wolf, CTV News, London.
Efforts to stop the killing in Bosnia are making little progress. The sticking point today was the Serbian control of 2 mountains overlooking Sarajevo. Serbian fighters held their positions on one of the strategic peaks, Mount Igman, and the United Nations says the Serbs retook positions on a second mountain after handing them over to UN troops yesterday. The Serbian hold on the 2 mountains has bogged down peace talks in Geneva. Bosnia's Muslim president says he won't negotiate until the Serbs withdraw and lift their siege of Sarajevo. Japan's new prime minister began his first day in office admitting something not heard from any other Japanese leader in 48 years. Morihiro Hosokawa said that Japan's behavior in World War II was aggressive and that it was wrong. Hosokawa said his new coalition government is considering an apology to Asian neighbors and other countries that suffered Japanese brutality during the war in the Pacific. In this country, the Canadian Jewish Congress is calling for a police investigation into a television program being made by Ernst Zundel. The Toronto man denies that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, and he's using an American satellite to broadcast those views all across North America. Paul Rogers reports.
It's called The Voice of Freedom, a weekly broadcast transmitted from a former NASA weather satellite by an American company in Denver, Colorado. The program's host is Ernst Zundel of Toronto, who calls himself a publisher and a Holocaust revisionist. Zundel's views are already well known in Canada. He believes the Holocaust was a hoax. In 1992, wearing his trademark hard hat, Zundel was acquitted by the Supreme Court of Canada of disseminating hate literature. Now, with funding from supporters and paying what he calls an affordable price, Ernst Zundel says his satellite program features interviews with people ignored by the mainstream media, including other Holocaust revisionists. Zundel says he would never have considered broadcasting from Canada.
Why should I subject myself under the dictatorial auspices of this Canadian Radio and Television Commission if I can do it without having to subject myself to their censorship?
There are a different set of laws in the United States, and unfortunately, really anything goes there.
Bernie Farber of the Canadian Jewish Congress is appealing to Showcase International, the Denver company which sells the satellite time, to pull the plug on Zundel, and he's pressing Toronto police to investigate because, as he says, it's not a matter of who broadcasts the program, but rather where it's recorded.
And if indeed these are being taped here in Toronto, we believe he is in violation of Section 319 of the Criminal Code, and that is a section that deals specifically with the propagation of hatred against an identifiable group.
Zundel promises to keep broadcasting as long as the money holds out. The Canadian Jewish Congress promises to fight.
Ernst Zundel is very much the father figure of the neo-Nazi movement on this continent, and young neo-Nazis are looking towards him and watching what he is doing. And if he isn't stopped, they believe that they have carte blanche to continue.
Paul Rogers, CTV News, Toronto.
And still to come in tonight's news, a 14-year-old who wants a divorce.
Yes, the last day.
The case of Kimberly Mays. Now it's all up to the judge.
All rise, this court adjourned.
On September 27, 1992, the world of opera and the world of rock came together on stage in Modena, Italy. Pavarotti and Friends, a once-in-a-lifetime happening, a once-in-a-lifetime recording captured forever on London Records. You can enjoy all the magic on home video, compact disc, or cassette, now, wherever music is sold.
Our McLobster is filled with big, tender chunks of Atlantic lobster. This is one sandwich that's bound to please everyone. Well, almost everyone.
At McDonald's today.
Kim Campbell rattled off a series of political and non-political one-liners today. The Prime Minister hosted a Vancouver morning radio show. It's all part of her pre-election strategy of taking her message directly to the people.
Kim Campbell, 97 Kiss FM.
Campbell introduced some music and answered questions from listeners about political personalities.
Pierre Trudeau.
Well, a very enigmatic person, no question about it. I wish he'd had more of an interest in economics.
And the Prime Minister couldn't resist a little dig at Ontario Premier Bob Rae.
Well, you know, Bob Rae and I have these very, cordial and pleasant conversations on the phone or in person, and then when he goes to the press, he, sucks on a lemon and says mean things.
But Campbell also had a serious message. She said Ontario's economic problems are Canada's problems, and she asked people to ease up on Ontario bashing. Audrey McLaughlin staged a rally with her campaign team today, and in spite of discouraging public opinion polls, the NDP leader painted a positive picture of the party's election prospects. CTV's Leslie Jones reports.
Our party stands with working people. We will share the struggle. And
for the NDP, the struggle this election is getting working people to buy that promise. The party has never been lower in the polls. Still, Audrey McLaughlin tried her best to rev up the campaign team.
With the passion that we have about this country is what will lead us through this election, and where we'll see more new Democrats than ever before elected.
Brave words. considering the party under a more popular leader won a record number of seats in the last election. But in the lead up to this campaign, McLaughlin says it's too early to write the party off.
And I truly believe that when people's attention is focused on the federal election, in such a volatile situation, we're going to see real change.
Well, I think there is a lot of volatility in the vote, but it's not towards the NDP. I think people have pretty well said, you know, look, I've kind of made up my mind on the NDP. The question right now is the Liberals and their team or Kim Campbell.
To even hang on to the seats it now has, pollsters say the party must find an issue that will capture voters' attention. More importantly, they say the party must distance itself from the unpopular NDP provincial governments. Advice not lost on the party's president.
Well, I don't think I'd go out and ask Bob Ray to walk down Danford with Audrey McLaughlin.
Nancy Rich admits party supporters feel so betrayed and abandoned by Bob Ray's government, it will be an uphill struggle to win them back. McLaughlin will begin that fight by borrowing a technique that worked so successfully for U.S. President Bill Clinton last fall. The party has paid $50,000 for a televised town hall meeting, hoping that during an hour of uninterrupted airtime, McLaughlin can convince Ontario voters that the party has not abandoned its traditional constituency. Leslie Jones, CTV News, Ottawa.
And U.S. President Bill Clinton attended a short but significant ceremony at the White House today. He watched as his hand-picked choice for ambassador to Canada was sworn into the job.
That I will support and defend.
Vice President Gore administered the oath for James Blanchard, the former governor of Michigan, who immediately spoke about the Canadian-U.S. relationship.
Hardly an issue that we're dealing with in the world today that we don't have a close and immediate and direct and strong relationship with Canada.
Blanchard was instrumental in Clinton's Michigan election campaign. He's been practicing law since losing the 1990 governor's election. In Sarasota, Florida today, final legal arguments were heard in the case involving Kimberly Mays. She's the young woman who was switched at birth and is fighting to cut all ties with her biological parents. All Kimberly wants is to continue living with the man who raised her. But as NBC's Bob Dotson reports, it's now up to a judge to decide.
There will be no winners here, just survivors, like any other divorce proceedings. But this one is between a girl and the mother who gave her birth.
When I was sitting in the courtroom, my eyes caught Kimberly's, and her eyes caught mine, and just instinctively the words came out of my mouth, "I love you."
It's too late. She's crossed the line.
During closing arguments today, Kimberly's lawyers called Regina Twig an obsessed stranger stalking Kimberly. She wants to stay with the man who raised her, Robert Mays.
Mrs. Twig believes that Bob Mays is a kidnapper.
Mays' real daughter and Kimberly were switched in a hospital on the day she was born.
Throughout the testimony, it's apparent that Bob Mays has insidiously let Kimberly know that he will be hurt if she visits with the Twigs.
If the judge withholds those visitation rights, the Twigs now threaten to sue for child custody.
We could not see down memory lane, and we could not know the heartache and pain. Standing on truth, the Twig family, fierce love and loyalty through life's tragedy.
Kimberly vows never to visit her biological mother again. Even if Judge Stephen Dakin rules she must.
All rise, this court's adjourned.
He has 60 days to decide. Bob Dotson, NBC News.
Smokers in this country are hoping to put their case front and center in a federal election. The group Smokers Freedom Society says tobacco taxes are too high and should be cut in half. Representatives of the group were in Ottawa today saying they intend to find out where federal candidates stand on the issue, and they'll encourage Canada's 6 million smokers to defeat those who don't support the tax reduction.
Unfair. We as smokers in this country are having to pay too much for our cigarettes, and we believe that something has to be done about it.
The Smokers Freedom Society says high taxes contribute to black market cigarette sales. However, anti-smoking groups say the new lobbying effort is simply a smoke screen for the tobacco industry. This was the final day for Ontario's public sector unions to reach new cost-cutting agreements with the province. The deadline for the so-called social contract deals is midnight tonight, but it will be at least a week before it knows how many unions have signed on. Those which fail to reach agreements will face tough legislated wage freezes. The Bank of Canada rate has reached a new 29-year low. It was set today at 4.2%. That's down 12 basis points. The chartered banks are now expected to trim their borrowing rates, but the interest paid on savings will likely fall as well. And some other economic figures were released today. Statistics Canada reports that department store sales were down across the country in June. Sales totaled less than $1 billion, down 1.4% from the same time a year ago. Coming up, fire on the water. Fuel feeds the flames after 3 ships collide.
I'll never go back to denture pastes or powders again.
Here's why. C-Bond Denture Adhesive. 2 powerful adhesives in a soft, micro-thin seal bonds dentures to your gums. Can hold comfortably all day.
You'll never go back to pastes or powders again.
C-Bond.
Here it comes, the winning $1 million number from Publishers Clearinghouse. If this number is on your entry, start celebrating because you're the newest $1 million winner in the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes.
In using these chemicals, Council is disregarding the health of the community and especially of the children who play in the parks.
Is Dollar Des Ormeaux violating its own bylaw on lawn spraying? Residents think so. More on Pulse News tonight.
And a little cognac. Why not? Until next week, this is Chef Gaston saying bon appetit.
Cut. Okay, let's hurry. Next show, 3 minutes.
It's so easy to see why Fantastic is Quebec's #1 spray cleaner.
2 minutes.
It quickly powers its way through tough kitchen grease.
10 seconds.
Hi, welcome to the Uncle Angus Garden Show. Me,
Fantastic, Quebec's #1 spray cleaner, now in a reclosable pouch.
A huge explosion and fire shook one of the largest seaports in the United States today. 3 vessels crashed together in Tampa, Florida. The collision set off a raging fire of aviation fuel and sent oil pouring into the water. NBC's Kenley Jones reports.
The huge explosion and fire early this morning was caused when a barge carrying 255,000 barrels of jet fuel collided with the second barge carrying heavy fuel oil and a freighter loaded with phosphate.
The second explosion just about knocked me down. You could feel the heat from the blast. The sky just billowed with orange flames as high as it can imagine.
Firefighters decided to let the jet fuel burn itself out after attempts to extinguish the blaze failed. Of greater concern now are between 5,000 and 8,000 barrels of the heavy black fuel oil that have spilled into the bay through a gash in the other barge. It did not catch fire. Containment booms are being deployed in an effort to keep the oil from environmentally sensitive areas of the bay, including a wildlife sanctuary.
The good news is that there has not been any wildlife involvement or turtles or manatees or any other endangered species at this point.
But environmentalists say there very well could be before the oil is cleaned up. Kenley Jones, NBC News.
2 separate earthquakes rocked New Zealand today. So far, there has been no word of any injuries, but authorities say the quakes triggered landslides, damaged buildings, and downed telephone lines. The first quake hit 600 kilometers southwest of the capital, Wellington, near the resort of Queenstown. It measured 6.3 on the Richter scale. 9 hours later, a similar-sized quake jolted the country's northern island, with its epicenter around the town of Wairoa. There's been a major recall of Saturn automobiles. Every Saturn that was produced before April 15th of this year should go back to the dealer to fix a wiring defect that's caused several dozen engine fires. The Saturn is built in Tennessee. 380,000 Saturns have been recalled, including about 23,000 sold in Canada. In other consumer news, researchers at Agriculture Canada have come up with a new way of making sure meat stays fresher for longer periods of time. The process uses a bacteria mixture, much like that found in everyday yogurt. Though it may sound like a recipe for disaster, preliminary tests already show that the so-called bacteria bath has been highly effective. David Gray reports.
When you buy a steak, you want it to be fresh, direct from the butcher's table to the supermarket package, and then transported as soon as possible to your backyard barbecue. But it rarely happens that quickly. By the time beef goes from here to your home, it could spend over 4 weeks in cold storage, followed by 2 to 3 days on the supermarket shelf. After that amount of time, it becomes a ripe host for any kind of bacteria that may happen along. It's called spoilage, and it costs the beef industry over $200 million every year. But now scientists with Agriculture Canada are battling the bacteria that makes beef go bad, and they're doing it with one of meat's own microorganisms. Through lab experiments, they found that lactic acid bacteria, like that found in yogurt, naturally prolongs the shelf life of beef, doubling the amount of time it can be stored or displayed. These cuts, though freshly packaged, are over 6 weeks old.
You can increase the time that the meat can be transported and stored and increase the market flexibility really for the retailer and hopefully increase the keeping quality for the consumer in the refrigerator at home.
It means Canadian meat can now be shipped fresh overseas, and the bacteria has already shown signs of inhibiting botulism, listeria, and hamburger disease. It's a promising idea as long as it passes one final test.
Taste panel test to ensure that what we're adding doesn't produce any flavors that would result in rejection by the consumer.
If the bacteria beef does prove tasty, it could be on the shelves in as little as 5 years. David Gray, CTV News, in Lacombe, Alberta.
Doctors could soon be using a new kind of super glue in place of stitches during operations. The adhesive has been proven effective in tests in Britain. It helps skin tissue mend in less than 10 seconds, giving it several advantages over stitches. When we return, Nova Scotia's Superman.
The other day, my daughter Lisa says,
"Mom, I'm gonna die."
I say, "Leave me your jewelry."
"Mom, my best jeans and this big ugly stain on the knee didn't come out. It's
gross." I say, "What knees?"
Ma, rips are cool. Stains aren't."
My old stuff wasn't working, so I thought I'd give Tide a try. I thought they were all the same, but Tide got out what the other couldn't.
If your detergent isn't working, what are you paying for?
Thanks, Mom. I'm gonna wear this forever. Wicked.
Forever. Great.
After selling 9 million copies of his debut album, Some Gave All, Billy Ray Cyrus returns to prove it's all about the music in his much-anticipated new album, It Won't Be the Last. It features his new smash hit, In the Heart of a Woman. Billy Ray Cyrus, It Won't Be the Last, on Mercury Records. Also available on home video, Billy Ray Cyrus live on tour on Polygram Video.
Oh, I love the Taurus. It's a great car. Hi, how you doing?
Mike. Hi, Tammy.
I like the child-proof locks in the car are great. I have a 2-year-old son who's always inquisitive, and they really made it easy, especially when they told me that, you know, I can get a sedan or I can get a wagon for the same price.
We chose the Taurus wagon because of the 2 airbags, and they're just not on the Chevy Lumina.
It's got a V6 engine in it. It gives me all the power I want.
Awfully nice looking car, eh?
I got the idea from you.
You show impeccable taste.
It was early in the day with all systems A-OK.
This is Control. What's that noise?
This is Control. That was Kellogg's Raisin Bran.
Say again?
Kellogg's Raisin Bran.
What's in it?
That's 2 scoops of plump, juicy raisins and whole grain flakes with bran.
They were all set to go, but you just had to know.
How many scoops?
2 scoops of raisins in a package of Kellogg's Raisin Bran.
Off the engines.
Hold on. 2.
Where's that Kellogg's Raisin Bran?
Finally tonight, it's been said that you can sometimes tell a lot about somebody by the company they keep. Well, a Nova Scotia man has been proving his worth by the amount he can lift. This summer, Greg Ernst put a firm grip on the title of World's Strongest Man. He made the Guinness Book of Records by lifting more than 2,400 kilograms, or more than 5,000 pounds. Jim Munson has more in tonight's CTV biography on the friendly giant of Lunenburg County.
This gentle countryside is home to one very strong farmer. When you have the title of the world's strongest man, the cows come home when you say so.
Get in the barn. Get in the barn, you guys.
But life on this 300-acre Nova Scotia farm is anything but typical. Greg Ernst loves to pick up rocks. It's a family tradition. For generations, they have been clearing rocks to create better farmland.
I enjoy lifting rocks. I've grown up lifting rocks on fields, and there's a certain, measure of a man's satisfaction in it, I guess you'd say.
To stay in shape, there's nothing like picking up a few rocks, especially the one his children call the family stone. 20 years ago, it was Greg's father who spotted this rock and mentioned that one day perhaps Greg might be able to lift it.
As a young boy, you always want to be, at least if your old man is a strong man, you want to be strong like the old man. And so I marked that rock off in my mind. That's the rock I got to lift. There.
Well, at 320 pounds, Greg is big all right, and lifting the close to 500-pound family stone is all part of his training for weightlifting competitions.
There in the air.
A folk hero in these parts, Greg Ernst has lifted everything from oxen to Ford Festivas, with the drivers included. He was at this recent exhibition, and in torrential rains, he did something strong men dream about. 2,400 kilograms, or 5,340 pounds, put this friendly giant into the Guinness Book of World Records, a feat authenticated by a strength historian.
The weights were carefully reweighed after it was over, and so he did it. He did something no one had ever done.
Back at home, living with the world's strongest dad has special benefits, particularly at bedtime.
And he lifts us up to the top of the ceiling, and we're way up there, and then he drops us, and we go, eee, and fall on the bed.
After a breakfast of steak, rice, sauerkraut, and yogurt, there is nothing like a light workout before getting back on the farm. After all, what's so tough about 162 pounds?
Soft living.
What you notice around the farm is that he seems to draw so much strength from his family.
Okay, there you go. Oh, I'm afraid. Still beating him this year. Family life and clean living and faith in God plays a large part in the possession of strength.
Jim Munson, CTV News, Lunenburg County, Nova Scotia.
And not to forget sauerkraut for breakfast. That's the kind of day it's been on this August the 10th. Tomorrow on Canada AM. The Keeper of the Creatures from Star Trek The Next Generation. And on CTV News tomorrow night. Turning back the clock at a festival in Quebec. I'm Lloyd Robertson for all of us here at CTV News. Good night.
CTV News, Canada's most watched newscast.